Do you want to know why we lost the war? The veteran's voice pierced the noise, his jaw clenched in anger as he took a sip of his drink. I'll tell you, it was because they never stood a chance against those insane apes. The young journalist leaned back, her antennae twitching with curiosity. She had heard rumors about the legendary battle between humans and the Caxter, but first-hand accounts were rare. Most veterans preferred to bury the memories, though it was hard to ignore the Empire's overwhelming military advantage. She hesitated before speaking cautiously. Military superiority? The veteran let out a loud, almost bitter laugh. Let me explain something to you about humans and war. His eyes locked onto hers with a stare so intense it made her uncomfortable. You think you understand violence, combat? You know nothing. He took another long sip, his gaze distant, as the dim station light flickered in his glass. This is what you need to grasp about humans. They turned fighting into an art form long before they even figured out how to leave their planet. While we were perfecting plasma cannons and energy shields, they were finding new and creative ways to kill each other, using nothing but metal scraps and explosives. Primitive? The journalist protested, slamming her drink down in disbelief. You call that primitive? The veteran smirked. Let me tell you about primitive then. When we first faced human forces, we deployed perfectly optimized formations, calculated by our most advanced AI systems. And do you know what they did? They looked at our perfect lines and laughed. Then they started throwing rocks at us. Rocks? Not just any rocks, he corrected. Tungsten rocks, big ones, falling from orbit. Do you have any idea what happens when a chunk of metal the size of a small car falls from space? They called them God's stones. The veteran's voice grew low and ominous. Pure kinetic force. No radiation, no energy signatures. Just, ha, death from above. The journalist's antennae drooped slightly. But surely our superior numbers. The veteran laughed again, a cold, unsettling sound. Oh, that's the best part. We thought the same. We had them outnumbered 10-1. But humans? They're experts at fighting when they're outgunned. He leaned forward, his face tightening with emotion. They've built an entire mythology around it. Thermopylae, Agincourt, Rorke's Drift. They love being the underdog, and they write songs about it. They even make movies about it. Their entire military history is one long tale of smaller forces defeating larger ones through sheer will and ingenuity. He moved to the bar to grab another drink, his eyes fixed on the journalist. You know what scares me the most about them? He said quietly. They gamified war. They turned it into a sport. While we were building military strategies based on cold logic, they were creating video games, battle simulations that became more complex every year. The journalist frowned, skeptical. But that's just simulation. The veteran waved his hand dismissively. Simulation, yes. But real combat? That's what they've been preparing for their whole lives. Every human child plays war games. Capture the flag, laser tag, you name it. They've turned fighting into entertainment. He paused, lowering his voice even further. And that's not even the scariest part. He leaned in, his smile almost predatory. What really terrifies me is their creativity. The journalist blinked, unsure where this was going. What do you mean? The veteran's expression darkened. Take the Battle of Proxima Centauri, for example. We had them cornered. Superior numbers, superior positions, superior firepower. By all tactical standards, they should have been finished. But do you know what they did? He paused, eyes heavy with the memory. They detonated their own antimatter containment fields. They wiped out their systems and ours with a massive electromagnetic pulse. They took out everything. Our shields, our sensors, everything. The journalist was stunned, unable to process the gravity of what he was saying. So what happened? The veteran sighed, leaning back in his seat. While both our fleets were dead in space, they launched boarding parties, using chemical rockets. Primitive stuff, right? No fancy space jets or teleportation, just old-fashioned mechanical rockets. He smiled, but it wasn't friendly. And do you know what was even crazier? They were singing some old war song, Blood on the Risers, about parachutes failing. The journalist's face twisted in confusion. They sing about their soldiers dying in horrific ways? Exactly, he said, his voice darkening further. They have songs about soldiers dying in the most brutal ways, and they sing them to keep their spirits up. What kind of species does that? The journalist's jaw tightened, her mind racing. But surely their lack of technology would have limited them. The veteran interrupted with a bitter chuckle. That's the trick everyone misses. We used to think their primitive tech was a weakness, but humans don't think about technology the way we do. To them, technology is just another tool in a much bigger toolbox. Plasma weapons, ballistic ones, quantum computers, mechanical systems, they use it all. Whatever works, whatever gets the job done. His eyes narrowed, voice growing even more intense. You want to know what really gets under your skin? Their language. They have a saying. There's more than one way to skin a cat. The journalist frowned, confused. What does that mean? The veteran leaned forward again, his smile twisted with dark amusement. It's a problem-solving language. Every word, every sentence, it's about finding a way to make things work. But you really need to think about it for a moment. They think we're primitive because we still use projectiles and traps, the veteran muttered, his voice low and tense. Let me tell you about that. He took another slow sip of his drink, the bitterness of his words matching the bitterness in his eyes. Sure, we had more advanced ships, better weapons, superior ships. He leaned back, looking past the young journalist and staring into the distance. Let me tell you about their ships, though. We built sleek, efficient vessels, all designed for maximum energy distribution, precision, everything in perfect order. He scoffed. Humans? They slapped engines onto hunks of metal, welded together with brute force. Their ships weren't pretty. They were brutal, ugly monstrosities made to take damage and keep fighting. They didn't care for elegance or refinement. They piled on layers of armor, and that was good enough. The journalist raised an eyebrow, intrigued despite herself. What about their weapons? The veteran's lips twisted into a sardonic grin. Weapons? We might have had energy weapons that could level cities, but humans? They brought everything to the table. Energy guns, chemical bombs, projectiles, kinetic weapons, biological threats, you name it. If it could kill, they used it. He paused, his eyes darkening. And then there was their psychological warfare. Mimetic tactics, fear-mongering. It wasn't enough to defeat us on the battlefield. They set out to break us mentally. They learned our culture, our fears, our weaknesses, and used them all against us. The journalist's antennae twitched, but she remained silent, trying to process this new angle. Wade spread rumors, urban legends, stories designed to make us doubt, make us fearful. By the time the war ended, we had soldiers on the front lines convinced that humans could smell fear, that if you didn't fight back, they'd give you a quicker death. She frowned, unsure whether to laugh or recoil. But that's absurd. The veteran chuckled, the sound sharp and unsettling. Absurd? That's the thing about humans. They don't care about what's absurd. They care about what works. He gestured across the bar at the group of humans who were laughing and exchanging bets in good spirits. Look at them now, just having fun, competing. But I've seen what happens when you push them. When you threaten their homes, their people, their way of life, they'll turn on you with a savagery that's terrifying. And why? Because every species that ever underestimated them Every species that didn't expect the worst ended up dead or caught off guard. The veteran's voice dropped lower as he spoke with cold certainty. And what is it about them? They don't just study martial arts. They don't just practice combat. They live it. They transcend it. They turn violence into art. Battle becomes a performance. To them, conflict isn't just war. It's a dance, a symphony. While we're still trying to figure out the basic steps, they've already written an entire opera. He finished his drink in one swallow, his jaw clicking as he set the glass down with finality. So, when someone tells you that humans are primitive because they still use projectile weapons or traps, or because they enjoy combat sports, remember this conversation. Remember that every piece of primitive technology they keep around has a purpose we've never even thought of. They've been at war for thousands of years, shaping and reshaping their tactics. And that love of competition, that's what drives them, to innovate, to evolve, to outwit. The veteran turned toward the door, then paused, his back to the journalist. "Oh, and one last thing," he added, his voice a low growl. "If you ever end up in a fight with a human, do yourself a favor. Be surprised. Immediately." "You see," the woman began, "most species fear us because we're skilled in combat, but that's just part of the story." She leaned forward, her eyes sharp and calculating. "The real danger is that we know where the line is. There are things we don't tolerate." "And when someone crosses that line?" the journalist asked, her voice tight with unease. The woman's smile returned, though it was colder this time. "The veteran you spoke to, he's seen us fighting conventional wars. He understands our strategies, our tactics. But he hasn't seen us when we're truly cornered, when we're truly enraged." The screen flickered again, showing more reports with military vessels from all over the sector were now converging on the Carina Nebula, and it wasn't just human ships. Ships from all major factions were joining in. The journalist's brow furrowed. "How is this possible?" "Alliances," the woman said calmly. "That's another thing humanity excels at." Her words hung in the air, filled with silent meaning. "When humanity goes to war," she continued, her voice cold and measured, "we don't just bring weapons. We bring allies, partners, people who'll fight alongside us. We've known for a long time that the greatest warrior isn't the one with the most weapons. It's the one who has the most people ready to stand by their side." The journalist glanced around, observing the humans moving with the precision of trained soldiers, and it became clear. Their strength wasn't just in their skills or power. It was in the vast network of relationships they'd built, the alliances they'd formed. That was when the depth of their power truly struck her. The woman's gaze shifted back to the screen, her expression unchanged. "Look," she said, her voice low but intense, "right now, every nation that signed the territorial accords is mobilizing. Not because they must, but because they know that when they need help, humanity will remember who stood with them." The journalist struggled to hide her skepticism. "But they're just pirates, right?" The woman's face hardened. "Just pirates." She leaned in, her voice colder. "They attacked children, refugees, those who couldn't defend themselves. Do you understand what that means to us?" Her eyes pierced through the journalist. The journalist paused, the gravity of the words settling in. "It means everything changes," the woman said, her tone sharp. "When we fight a traditional war, there are rules, ethics. But when someone crosses a line like this, attacking the defenseless," she gestured at the screen, where more ships were gathering. "That's when the real power of humanity reveals itself." The officer from earlier appeared at their side, urgency in his voice. "Task forces are assembling. There are similar pirate factions emerging in other sectors. We've been tracking them for a while." "Of course," the woman said, almost to herself. "We don't forget." The journalist, now fully engaged, pressed further. "Never forget what?" The two humans exchanged a look. The officer spoke first, his tone steady. 3 years ago, the same pirates attacked another ship. We couldn't prove it was them, but we knew. So we waited. We watched. We built networks, gathered intel, and forged alliances. The woman's voice was firm, unwavering. "We always learn from the past, and we never forget." "Now?" the journalist asked, her curiosity piqued. "Now they've given us a reason," the officer said, his voice dark with finality. And in that moment, the true nature of humanity's power became clear. When they could act with righteous anger, when they had a moral foundation for their actions, they were unstoppable. The screen flickered again. Military ships from across the sector were closing in on the pirates. The journalist watched in awe as ships from multiple species moved as one, executing maneuvers that seemed impossible for such a diverse fleet. "How are they working together like that?" she whispered. "Because we trained them," the officer replied with quiet pride. "After the war, we shared everything, our tactics, our knowledge. Not everything, of course, but enough." The woman spoke again, her voice calm but resolute. "We learned that the best warriors aren't the ones with the most weapons. They're the ones who have the most allies, and the ones who know how to make others trust them." The journalist nodded slowly, beginning to understand. "Trust," the woman said, her expression calculating as the operation unfolded with military precision. "Trust is a weapon stronger than any battleship." Within hours, the pirates were captured. The refugee ship was secure. The journalist couldn't help but marvel at the efficiency, the ruthlessness, and yet the mercy that underpinned the operation. She watched as most of the pirates surrendered, some fighting back or trying to flee, but none succeeded. "Wait," the journalist said, her voice a mix of disbelief and realization. "Are they giving the pirates a chance to surrender?" "Of course," the woman replied, her tone casual. "That's rule number 1 of human warfare. Always give them a chance. Always offer a way out." The journalist frowned. "But the goal isn't to destroy them?" "No," the officer said. "The goal is to make sure they never want to fight again. And sometimes the best way to do that is to show mercy when you have every right not to." She watched as the pirates, subdued and broken, were taken into custody. Some of them realized the opportunity they'd been given and surrendered. Others fought until the end, but all were captured. "That," the woman said, her voice full of quiet authority, "is why we are the gods of war." She leaned back, her eyes scanning the room as if taking in everything around her. "Not because we're the strongest, or the most advanced, or the most brutal, but because we understand something others don't. True power isn't just about winning battles. It's about knowing which battles are worth fighting and how to win them in ways that avoid further conflict." The journalist's mind raced as she realized the complexity of the lesson unfolding before her. This wasn't just about fighting. It was about something far deeper. Humanity's ability to wield power with wisdom and restraint. The woman, dressed casually but carrying the air of a military strategist, adjusted her jacket. The journalist suddenly realized the true nature of her composure. This woman wasn't just any officer. She was a master of both peace and war. "One last lesson about humanity and war," the admiral said, her voice carrying the weight of experience. "We're not just good at fighting wars, we're good at ending them. Sometimes with violence," she added, "sometimes with mercy, and sometimes a combination of both. That always," the officer concluded, "always with purpose." The journalist felt a wave of understanding wash over her. The pirates had underestimated humanity, thinking that their light-hearted demeanor and playful nature made them weak. They hadn't realized that gods could be both kind and terrifying, and humanity had perfected the art of being both. She turned back to the screen, where the combined fleet awaited the pirates at the starbase. The refugee ship was being tended to by medical ships from 3 different species, working together seamlessly. Humanity had once again proven why they were called the gods of war, not through superior firepower or cutting-edge technology, but through something far more potent: unity, trust, and the rare ability to wield both strength and mercy with equal precision. The humans at the bar who had been singing joyfully now sang something quieter, more reflective. The familiar tune of Amazing Grace filled the room, and the journalist understood why. It wasn't just a song, it was a reminder of the power of mercy and the humility of remembering the cost of war. As the last notes echoed, the journalist knew her story had changed. She had come to write about war, but now she was writing about something much deeper: humanity's rare ability to remember mercy, even in the face of overwhelming power. "You might think that's the reason," the veteran said, leaning back, his gaze steady. "But actually, it's the opposite. When humans go to war, we don't just carry weapons. We carry memories. We carry stories. We carry the lessons written in blood and fire." The journalist, now fully absorbed in his words, tilted her head. "So, it's not just about the weapons? It's about the weight of history?" "Exactly," the veteran replied, his tone soft but resolute. "Every human warrior bears the burden of those who came before us. It's not just about their victories or their losses, but their sacrifices, their pain. That weight makes us better warriors. It teaches us the true cost of war." The journalist's antenna twitched thoughtfully. "Is that why humans fight so differently from other species?" "Partly," the admiral interjected. "Most species see war as a tool, something to achieve a goal, but we see it as part of an ongoing story, one that's still being written." The veteran nodded. "Every battle, every conflict, every war, these are all chapters in a book that started when the first human picked up a stone to protect their tribe. And we're still writing it, still learning, still remembering." One of the students gestured to the journalist's screen, still showing updates from the pirate incident. "Is that why everyone responded so quickly? Because of the memories?" "Exactly," the admiral replied. "When we saw that refugee ship under attack, we didn't just see a current event. We saw every time one wasn't attacked, every innocent life not lost, every time someone tried to find refuge in a cold, uncaring universe." The veteran's voice softened. "We remembered. We always remember. But it's more than that," the admiral continued. "We don't just fight because we have to. We fight because we know the cost of war. We know the price of peace." The veteran smiled faintly. "And that's why we're the gods of war. Not because we've never made mistakes, but because we always learn from them." And the lesson was clear. To truly understand humanity's war strategy, one had to look beyond the battlefield, into the hearts and minds of the people who fought, because the true weapon of humanity wasn't just their firepower. It was their memory,